Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to explore the life of a true titan of history, Marie Sklodowska-Curie. But, we're not just going to run through a list of her famous Nobel Prizes. Instead, we're really diving into this incredible fusion of her unwavering scientific method and her profound compassion. It's like her legacy is defined by this perfect, delicate balance between pure intellectual pursuit and a deep, deep sense of social responsibility.
So, that brings us to a fascinating question. We so often just focus entirely on the scientific breakthrough itself, right? That big eureka moment. But Curie's life actually challenges us to look a lot deeper at the method and the morals behind the genius. It forces us to ask, is it just about what you discover, or is it about how and why you use it? Her life is an absolute masterclass in proving that how you conduct your research and who you do it for is just as crucial as the discovery itself.
Here's our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll start with the genesis of rigor, then move to unlocking the unseen, cover the humanitarian imperative, and finally look at her enduring ethical legacy.
Let's kick things off with Part 1, the genesis of rigor, and how she overcame occupation and poverty.
Her scientific rigor didn't start in some pristine, well-funded laboratory. It literally started in resistance. Born Maria Sklodowska in Warsaw under Russian occupation, just the simple act of learning Polish language and culture was strictly suppressed. So her intellectual curiosity naturally became this bold act of defiance. And because women were completely barred from the male-dominated University of Warsaw, she and her sister Bronislava actually joined the underground flying university, which was exactly what it sounds like, a clandestine moving institution for forbidden knowledge. She even worked as a governess to fund her sister's medical studies in Paris, making a pact that her sister would later return the favor. By the time she finally made it to the Sorbonne in Paris, she was living on absolutely meager resources, often skipping meals just to study physics, which was, of course, a heavily male-dominated field. Yet she graduated at the top of her class. This intense, early struggle really built the bedrock of just absolute determination.
And those early struggles, they cemented an absolute, uncompromising dedication to empirical evidence. In an era where scientific discovery could easily be swayed by personal bias or established theories, Curie prioritized systematic investigation over convenience every single time. She wasn't interested in what classical physics just assumed to be true. Her primary allegiance was always, without fail, to the data.
Moving right along to Part 2, Unlocking the Unseen and her methodological triumph.
Now, this was a real game changer when it comes to her core innovation. Henry Becquerel had discovered that uranium salts emitted these mysterious rays, right? But Curie didn't just look at the glowing salts and jot down some qualitative notes. Instead, she used a highly sensitive electrometer, actually designed by her husband Pierre, to quantitatively measure the incredibly faint electric currents of the radiation. This was a massive methodological leap. By introducing that level of precision, she noticed a crucial anomaly. Pitchblende, which is a uranium-rich ore, was way more radioactive than its uranium content alone could possibly explain. And that proved pitchblende had to contain completely unknown, highly radioactive elements.
But, as we all know, suspecting something is there and actually proving it are two very different things. To isolate those hidden elements, she and Pierre went through a grueling, iterative chemical process known as fractional crystallization. Dissolving, precipitating, filtering, crystallizing over and over and over again, and they did all of this in a rudimentary shed with terrible ventilation. It's honestly a perfect testament to the essence of scientific rigor, constantly testing, refining, and physically laboring through the data.
Just 1/10 of a gram. To put that into perspective, to extract that minuscule amount of pure radium chloride, Marie and Pierre physically processed literal tons of pitchblende residue. The sheer scale of this undertaking is just staggering. They eventually isolated two elements, polonium, named after Marie's native Poland, of course, and radium. And here's the kicker. This immense effort wasn't for fame or fortune. It was driven by an insatiable desire to understand the fundamental nature of these new radiations.
So her rigor wasn't just physical, it was deeply philosophical. She meticulously documented her raw data and her experimental procedures with remarkable clarity. Why? So that other scientists could independently replicate her findings. She really set a brand new standard for scientific integrity and trust. And perhaps the most mind-blowing part for the time was that she followed the data to challenge the massive prevailing paradigm that atoms were indivisible and immutable. She proved that atoms could actually spontaneously emit energy and transform, completely change the game. Which brings us to Part 3, the humanitarian imperative, where we look at knowledge for the public good.
In an age of growing proprietary claims where scientists and corporations were locking down their discoveries for profit left and right, Marie and Pierre made a shocking, genuinely selfless choice. They deliberately chose not to patent the radium isolation process. Obviously, that was a massive financial disadvantage, but she firmly believed that scientific discoveries belong to humanity as a whole. Scientific truth, in her eyes, should be used to alleviate suffering and advance our knowledge, not for personal enrichment. Her science was fundamentally driven by a moral imperative.
And that humanitarianism became literal, boots-on-the-ground action during World War I. Recognizing that the widespread use of X-rays was really limited by stationary equipment, she spearheaded the development of mobile X-ray units, affectionately called Petites Curies. But she didn't just invent them and safely stay put in Paris. No way. She empowered women by personally training them with the technical skills to operate the generators and machinery. And she frequently drove these units to the front lines herself, repeatedly exposing herself to the immense dangers of the battlefield, all to allow surgeons to rapidly locate shrapnel and save countless soldiers' lives.
Her commitment extended far beyond the battlefield, too. Even as she unknowingly suffered from severe, accumulating radiation-induced illnesses, which, by the way, she often downplayed, her altruism drove her to look to the future. She recognized the power of radium to destroy diseased cells, so she founded the Radium Institutes in both Paris and Warsaw. She built lasting infrastructure that provided life-saving radiotherapy treatments for cancer to countless individuals. She wasn't just observing the universe, she was actively trying to heal it.
Let's wrap things up with Part 4, an enduring ethical legacy and the blueprint for today.
Marie Curie perfectly demonstrated that intellectual brilliance, uncovering the fundamental forces of the universe, and compassionate action, actively working to alleviate human suffering, well, they are not mutually exclusive. They aren't in competition at all. Instead, they're highly synergistic forces. When you combine rigorous empirical truth with an unwavering desire to help others, that is how you drive true, lasting societal progress.
Her legacy absolutely continues to shape the foundations of our world today. Her meticulousness established the benchmark for scientific reproducibility that researchers are still striving for. She essentially created the early framework for what we now call responsible innovation, this whole idea that science has to serve the public good. Furthermore, rising from a clandestine underground school in Poland to becoming the first person to win Nobel Prizes in 2 different scientific fields, she absolutely shattered gender barriers, proving once and for all that intellectual capacity is totally blind to gender. But above all else, she proved that science must always be guided by a moral compass.
I'm going to leave you with this final, vital thought to consider. Marie Curie firmly believed that if you have the privilege of understanding the universe, you carry an inherent responsibility to better it. So as we navigate the incredibly complex ethical challenges of our own modern technological breakthroughs, from AI to genetic engineering, we really have to ask ourselves, how are we applying Marie Curie's standard to the discoveries of today? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I hope this sparks a brand new perspective on the true purpose of innovation.